My name is Matthew Levine with Newman Catholic Students. On behalf of Newman Catholic Students and the Roncalli Newman Center, thank you for joining us for tonight's discussion. Faith and science, fight or fusion? A topic that is not new to this campus. Starting with the question, can a religious person of faith also pursue a scientific discipline? Our two presenters will discuss the interplay between religion and science, between faith and reason. Speaking from the Academy of Science and Reason is Dr. Czerwinski, UWL professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. And speaking of faith and religion, we have Father James Kurczynski, the pastor of Roncalli Newman Student Center. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to tonight's discussion, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me in the back? I didn't do a big sound check, so I'm not accustomed to actually using microphones either. Well, thank you all for coming. I am Kurt Czerwinski from the Chemistry Department, Biochemistry Department here at UWL. That is Father James Kurczynski, and from Roncalli Newman across State Street over there. We worked this out that we're hoping to spend about an hour talking about this topic, answering the question, can a person of religious faith pursue a scientific discipline? And the way we worked this out, I guess we had an arm wrestling match or something like that, and I lost. Surprise. And that means I'm going to go first. So I'll present something that I just talked about for about 35 minutes or so, and then we'll go over to Father James. And if you have any questions as we're going through this, please, we'd ask you to kind of hold off until the end. There will be a question and answer session at the end. And maybe if you come up with a question, maybe we're about to answer it in the next slide. So if you can just hold on to any questions. At the end, Father James would be more than happy to answer all your questions. So the question we're looking at, can a person of religious faith pursue a scientific discipline? And my answer is simply going to be yes. I mean, just there it is, yes. I believe that there are two conditions for this, however. And the conditions are, you should avoid extreme fundamentalism, then you can do it, and you might have to change your view of God. Talk about those two things. I plan on talking more about avoiding extreme fundamentalism first. I'll talk more about that, and then just a little bit about how you might have to change your view of God. I think you'll find out that's maybe a little bit more personal, so I don't have as much to say about that one. You might be wondering, though, why this guy? Why is this guy up here? Why am I the science dude? Why did they pick me, or what did I do wrong to get up here? What is my background? What qualifies me to be standing up here talking to you? So I'm not applying for a job, but this is my resume if I were, I guess. Some background about me. I've been here for about 16 years now at UWL, teaching organic chemistry, teaching general chemistry, and I think what I feel like might be more important is what you see in the next few lines, that I've been doing science for about a quarter of a century. I've been doing science research. And to me, that really is where you make the breakthroughs. I mean, we can talk about what's in textbooks, right? But when you really get into the research lab, that's where you kind of meet the uncertainty head on. And that's where you can really develop a really good understanding, I feel like, about what's going on with science. And that dates back all the way through some postdoctoral research and my graduate school work at Madison, back to college. And you can also see one thing up here that's related to faith, 1987 graduate of Pelea High School. Shot, yes, there we go. All right, anyway, we got one. Yeah. So actually, I should say, so Pelea High School is a Catholic high school. So I went to a Catholic high school, and actually, there's something more up here that is maybe a longer timeline than any of these. 1969 to the present. Yes, since I was born, I've been a Catholic, and I've come from a long line of Catholics. And 45, in case you're doing the math. Okay, let's just get that out of the way right now. So I come from a long line of Catholics. When I was 6 weeks old, I was baptized in a Catholic church. My aunt and uncle were my godparents. They were holding me as a baby. They were Catholic. My mom and dad were Catholic. My grandparents on both sides, Catholic. My great-grandparents, Catholic. All my cousins, Catholic. They were Catholic. Yeah, I come from this line of Catholics. And as I grew up, everything we did, I was just immersed in Catholic stuff. Catholicism. What we did just seemed completely normal to me. My mom would throw me out of bed at 7 in the morning on Sundays to go to church. She would haul me to church on all those holy days of obligation, you know, Easter and Christmas and Assumption and New Year's Day, and church on that day, and all those things that we did as Catholics were just normal to me. Working the rosary beads, you know, and eating the fish on Friday and getting the ashes on my forehead on Ash Wednesday. All that stuff was just normal to me. I never questioned it. Never questioned it. And even through high school, as I'm taking all these courses, and I felt like I was really doing well in math and science, I really was drawn to math and science, still I was surrounded by all these other kids who were Catholic, growing up in Stevens Point. It's pretty heavily Catholic. And I got to college and realized I had never actually questioned any of my faith. I had never even questioned how it could possibly be that faith and science don't mesh with each other. Well, who would ever think that there would be a question? So here I'm in college then, on this trajectory, without ever questioning, thinking, well, sure, I'm well on my way to becoming a professional chemist. Not questioning it. I'm well on my way to becoming, you know, lifelong Catholic without questioning it. And then I met a girl. Now, no, actually, it's not that. It's short of that, actually. Before anything like dating actually happened. Yeah, I met this girl. She liked me. I liked her. There's a lot of flirting going on. We had a lot of classes together. And I remember one day we were studying together in the library, and we were studying for a chemistry test. And she reached over and closed my book and said, "We need to talk." Uh-oh. She said, "I need to know what you believe." I said, "What I believe? What I believe is you just closed my book and we got a chemistry test tomorrow and I'm not done studying this chemistry test yet." She said, "No, I need to know what you believe." And she pulled out one of these. I said, "That's a Bible." She said, "Yes, it is." "You're packing a Bible wherever you go?" She said, "Oh, definitely." Now, to make a long story short, she told me she was a born-again Christian. And she wanted to know if we were going to go anywhere with this budding relationship, that she wanted to know that I believed literally every word that was in that book, because she most assuredly did. Well, I didn't think that I did. I came from a long line of Catholics, after all, and, you know, we are stereotypically not people who memorize chapter and verse. We know what's in the book. We don't have the whole thing memorized. We just know what's in there. Well, she launched into 2 hours of a conversation where she was flipping through and picking out chapter and verse and saying, "Here's why you've got to stop being a Catholic, and here's why you should just renounce all this and come join me." And wow, I didn't really care for that too much. She told me how horrible the Catholic Church was. You got to get out of it, she said. You got to get out of it. She had a big problem with the fact that we just went to church for 1 hour on a Sunday. That was it. And you guys don't read the Bible. You don't know chapter and verse. Okay. Kept on talking. I said, "Look, I got some problems with this, all right? If you take the Bible literally, look at the things that you have to believe. You believe we're studying for a chemistry test. You have to believe that the earth was created in 6 24-hour days in 144 hours. Really. You have to believe, if you take it literally, that the earth is 6,000 years old. You can't eat bacon, ham, or pork. I saw you eating a bacon cheeseburger. We went to lunch. I know you did it." He said, "Come on, that's not it." I said, "It is in the Bible, in the book of Deuteronomy, that you cannot eat pork if you take it literally." She said, "Where? What chapter? What verse?" I said, "I don't know. I'm Catholic." "How am I supposed to know a chapter and verse? I don't know." I said, "It's in there, though. I know it's in there. Don't memorize it. Just know how to use it." Right? 3 or 4 students? Oh, yeah. And so it began. Well, yeah, it's in there. You can't eat bacon, ham, pork. One of the things I said to her was, "Look, if you take this book literally, then you explain to me why it is that the book of Genesis has 2 creation stories." She said, "No, it doesn't." "Where? What chapter?" I said, 1, 2 maybe? I don't know. "Well, okay, if you look, there really are 2 creation stories." "Yeah, there are. Chapter 1, you're reading along. God makes everything, ending with man and woman in his own image. You flip the page to chapter 2, we started over." "What? I thought you made everything. How come we're starting all over again?" "Really? There's a second story here." I said, "I'll answer the question for you," because she had no answer. I said, "It's because the Genesis creation story is a myth." And that was the end of our relationship. And I don't, you know, today we hear the word myth and it means fib, lie. It means a lie. A myth It's something different when you talk about literature. Lie. I mean, we're not talking about Mythbusters here. I love that show, by the way. That later. It's a literary style. It's a style of writing that people used to use long, long ago, before science existed. People used to write using myth to explain the truth of a natural phenomenon. People didn't have science labs back then. They didn't have genetics. They didn't have A&P. They didn't have organic chemistry. They didn't have science. And so what they wanted to do, wow, we're living in this amazing universe. How do we explain this? And they created epic characters. They told this story, and it was passed down generation after generation after generation until finally somebody wrote it down. A myth, as we talk to people who do research in literature, a myth is a style of writing. Doesn't mean it's fake. It means that the people at the time were writing to the best of their ability to explain the best explanation they had. There are plenty of them in the Bible. There's all kinds of writing in the Bible. See, the Bible is not just one book. It's 73. It's 73 books, all written in a different style, conveying some sort of truth about this on-again, off-again relationship these people have with God. A lot of it was passed down by word of mouth until finally somebody wrote it down, and there are different types of writing for different purposes. Yeah, the Genesis creation story is an amazing thing that talks about some sort of truth of creation, but nobody had any scientific background. So it is a myth. Is it completely false? No. It talks about God creating everything. But the scientific details are not there. Biblical scholars help us figure this out so that we don't have to sit here and say, well, no, wait, is this a myth? Is this a law? Is this history? Here's my best example. I love to talk about this. Biblical scholars help us figure stuff out. Now, in the book of Exodus, we hear all about how Moses helped the Hebrews escape from slavery. And then we watch the Ten Commandments. You've seen the Ten Commandments, right? Or at least you are aware that there is a movie called The Ten Commandments. And in that movie, Charlton Heston gets his back up against the Red Sea. He's trying to get the people out of slavery. And what do we do? The Egyptians are coming. What do we do? Help us, Charlton Heston. Charlton Heston holds up his arms in a beautiful vista vision. That's what it was called, the waves part. And they go through on dry land. And sometime later, they get to the other side. Here it is. They're on the other side. He holds up his arms, and the waves come crashing down. And look at the four Egyptians here. Ah! Didn't make it. Is that really the way it happened? That's what sold tickets. About 1,000 years before anybody in this room was born, biblical scholars who made it their life's work to figure out what's going on with these writings said, you know, it's the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea. Here's the Red Sea down here. They crossed up here. Why would they come all the way down here? Cross this massive body of water. What do you make a movie? Then come all the way back up here. Right there. The Sea of Reeds, Yamsuf is the translation. It's a marsh. Think of Byron Park. There was an east wind blowing. Read it again with a new set of eyes. There was an east wind blowing. It is connected ultimately to the ocean. Maybe it was low tide. Sure. The wind blew. It drained enough. They said, come on, let's go. They went through. They made it. Several hours later, the wind stopped. Tide rushed back in. The Egyptians tried to go through this. It was flooded perhaps more than this. They got heavy armor. They got chariots. They got horses. They got spears. They couldn't make it. They drowned. Does that make it any less than an incredible story? I don't think so. If you think it does, I challenge you, try to get a bunch of people together to do something. Now try to get about, a couple thousand of them. Hey, the cops are coming. Let's go through the marsh. Right. But they did. And they got the freedom. My point, biblical scholars can help us make sense out of this. Well, here's maybe what not to do. Remember some dates like this? May 21st, 2011, the end of the world is coming. Remember these headlines? December 21st, 2012 was the most recent one. This guy, a Christian evangelist and fundamentalist. Remember my point I'm trying to make here. Avoid extreme religious fundamentalism. Avoid extreme fundamentalism. He calculated the date of the Great Flood. Noah, the guy who in 7 days somehow built a massive boat, then went around the entire world, picking up 2 of every animal that exists. He got a lion and a female lion. He got a gazelle and a female gazelle. And put them on a boat together. Never mind that they would eat each other. No. Came all the way to North America, got a grizzly bear and a female grizzly bear, a white-tailed deer and a female deer. Now, any hunters in the audience? How long do you sit in that deer stand? Not seeing anything. Oh, he got one. Yeah. All right, so this guy uses the Great Flood. He calculates somehow using Scripture. Oh, it was the 17th day of the second month, May 21st, 4990. Write it down. That was the date. Really? Oh, yeah. It's in the Bible. 7 days from now, I will send rain on the earth. He takes this to mean, this guy, takes 7 days to mean that's the end of the world, and later finds, oh, with the Lord a day is 1,000 years. He's being sarcastic here. He says, oh, 7 days, that's 7,000 years. Exactly 7,000 years later will be the end of the world, May 21st, 2011. That's it. You gotta be kidding me. That's what you're using the Bible for? That is not how to use the Bible. Look at the context. All those biblical scholars saying this is how this was written. This is how this was written. Are there facts? Yeah, sure. Is there truth? Yes, absolutely. But look, when you use a Betty Crocker cookbook, if you want to look up the population of Canada, if you want to know how to change your spark plugs or oil in your car, when you put in a Christmas CD and say, well, I hope it says something to me, there are different styles of literature in the Bible. And we have to know how to use them. Now, you have to avoid extreme fundamentalism if you want to combine religion and science. I say, but I'm going to kind of call out the atheists on this too. These fish, I don't know. Read through the top here. Evolutionism might be the opposite of creationism, but let's be careful. Evolutionism is not the opposite of religion. People in the 70s and 80s started putting these fish on their cars. They said, hey, look, everybody, I'm a Christian. And some atheists, and it was really these guys who came up with it, some atheists said, we are taking fish offense. We are offended by the fish. We do not like the fish. We do not like this fish on the cars of other people. We want to have a rebuttal of our own kind of fish. What's the rebuttal of our kind of fish? Let's see. These are Christians. What's the opposite of Christianity? I know, evolution. Wrong. The opposite of Christianity is evolution? No. The opposite is creationism. And it's wrong for an atheist to say, oh, look, you're a Christian. You've got to believe that the earth was made in 6 days, because it says so in the Bible. You've got to believe that it was made 6,000 years ago, because it says so. No. I read it with my brain turned on. And, seriously. It's like, well, the words say, I've got to believe it. Well, no. We know how this thing was written. It was written as a myth. It was written to convey a truth. Christian does not mean creationist. I don't believe in creationism. I believe in the Big Bang Theory. I believe our whole universe was in a hot, dense state that nearly 14 billion years ago started. Wait, that's called the Big Bang. I believe in that. I don't believe our world, our Earth, was created in 6 days. Do you believe that? No. See? There you go. Christians can believe in the Big Bang Theory. Christians can believe in the theory of evolution. A person of religious faith can pursue a scientific discipline if they avoid extreme fundamentalism. Talk about the Big Bang. You might have heard there's a TV show. Who is responsible? Let's stop for a little quiz here. Who is responsible for proposing the Big Bang Theory? Ever think about this? The answer is none of them. These two guys were on the Big Bang Theory. That's why I put them on here. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's getting a lot of press. This guy is great. I love this guy. He's doing a lot for science in the public eye. Stephen Hawking, incredible mind. Neither one of them. Neither one proposed the Big Bang Theory. Albert Einstein, really smart dude. He had to do it, right? Nope. Carl Sagan, good guess. Not Carl Sagan either. How about Edwin Hubble? He's the guy after whom the Hubble Space Telescope is named. That would be a good second guess, because he did perfect some of the constants that are associated with the equations in the Big Bang Theory. But, you're right, none of these. You might be surprised to figure out who it is, to find out who it is who actually came up with the Big Bang Theory. A Catholic priest. This is no myth. It's no fib. A Catholic priest, Monsignor Georges Lemaitre. He's a priest. Okay, that's it. This guy right here. Let's call him Monsignor George. Seriously, he was a priest. He was a super priest. He was a Monsignor. He came up with this. He's super priest. That's what Monsignor is. That's what Monsignor Pierce told me of being super priest. Yeah, he was a physicist. Yes, he was a priest. He was a physicist. Now, you might say, well, okay, when he came up with his discovery, then he saw this amazing discovery, right? And so then he quit the priesthood and he turned to science because he saw the light. Not at all. Not at all. He was a priest. Yes, he was a priest, and his work in physics and astronomy led to the development in 1927 to the development of what we now call the Big Bang. Now, here's something else you might not know. I love this picture. This is Pope Pius XII looking through a telescope. The Catholic Church supports both the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution. Pope Pius XII, upon hearing about this discovery, completely embraced the idea. Said, this is fantastic. We now have scientific data to say, wow, we know we've got a Genesis now. See, he knew how to read the Bible. He knew what was going on in Genesis. He said, now we have scientific data. Let's make this into church doctrine. Let's say that this is now church doctrine. And Monsignor George says, could we not? I'm a scientist, and I understand the way science goes. This is a theory. Coming up the next 5 or 10 years, somebody might come up with a different idea. And then what? Then we got to start hopping around with church doctrine? Could we just hold off on that? He didn't want a lot of credit for this, and that's why people like Hubble get their face on postage stamps and Time magazine covers, and he's actually the one who came up with it. And yes, the Catholic Church supports the book, The Big Bang Theory and Evolution. Pope John Paul II on science and evolution. Science can purify religion from error and superstition. Religion can purify science from idolatry and false absolutes. He's saying science needs religion, religion needs science. You need both of them. Each can draw the other into a wider world, a world in which both can flourish. I love this next one. New findings lead us toward the recognition of evolution as more than a hypothesis, speaking like a true scientist would say it. The convergence in the results of these independent studies constitutes in itself a significant argument in favor of the theory. It works. Look at that. I love that look. Of course. This is Pope John Paul II, saint. How about our current Pope? Pope Francis on evolution of the Big Bang. First of all, I love this too. Caution against the image of God the Creator as a magician with a magic wand. God is not some kind of nature imp, running around in the woods, knocking over piles of rocks, lurking in the trees, throwing thunderbolts down at you from bluffs. That's not it. That's not it. God is somehow outside of nature. Whoa. Arguing that both theories, belief in both theories around the beginnings of the universe and the birth of humankind are consistent with the Catholic faith. The Big Bang, which is today posited as the origin of the world, does not contradict the divine act of creation. Rather, it requires it. 3 popes saying yes. It seems like the big hang-up. Isn't the big hang-up about creation and evolution? Isn't the big hang-up about the Big Bang Theory? Well, can we dismiss those things, please? Can we say people just read this book of Genesis for what it was meant to be read as? We could get over this? All right, scientists, our turn. Avoid extreme scientific fundamentalism as well. We got the people over here reading, I mean you, the people over here hypothetically, getting way religious fundamentalists, like, ooh, let's back that off a little bit. What about the scientists over here? It's incorrect to say science can know everything. We can't know everything. We can't. If you're a good scientist, you're going to know that. You're going to know that there's uncertainty. Let's look at a few examples from chemistry and physics. The Bohr model of the hydrogen atom. You might remember making models of this in grade school. You put your gumdrops and your pushpins and your P's or whatever into the nucleus, right? All your positives, your neutrons, and your protons, okay. And then you draw the orbits, just like the planets orbiting around the sun. Wrong. And if someone were to dig their heels in about this and say, that's the way it is, darn it, sorry, it works for hydrogen. When you move to atom number 2, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for helium. So what we did instead, not this, new theory, change your way of thinking. And instead of thinking about the electron as just a thing, this showed up. You've got to start thinking about the electron differently. It's not just a particle. It's not just something you got to be able to measure the mass of. It is a wave. At the same time, it is both a particle and a wave. A particle and a wave. Pure energy and pure thing at the same time. How do you possibly imagine that? When you do, you can start to plot out these wave functions that end up showing you where the electron could be around the nucleus. And then you realize, oh, but wait a minute, that doesn't work for molecules. Oh. For molecules, you got to smash the orbitals together and use hybrid orbitals. You say, okay, we got it, there's the theory. No, but that might be too simplistic, you need molecular orbitals. Oh. And then you say, okay, I understand molecular orbitals, yeah. And then we say, well, we got to tweak that too. Oh. The ups and downs here say you always have to be open to saying, even in science, avoid the fundamentalism that says, once you come up with it, we know it. Done, got it. Nope, not so much. Scientists who believe they cannot be wrong would not be able to explain observations. Avoid extreme fundamentalism in religion and science. So some of you are probably wondering, I hope he shows some organometallic chemistry tonight. I hope he does, because that's the reason I'm going. So, all right, here's some stuff from my own research. In chemistry, we love to show mechanisms, right? You love mechanisms, don't you? Oh, yeah, say yes. We love to show these step-by-step processes in organic chemistry. Okay, so back here in 1968, a guy named Fisher, after who this kind of compound is named, came up with an important molecule in organometallic chemistry. It's called a hydroxycarbene compound. Very important, crucially important. We know that it decomposes into something like this. Look at that, Chem 304 students. It's an aldehyde. Bet you can make that from alcohol. Okay, anyway, we know that it decomposes. He said, we got a mechanism, but I can most assuredly tell you it's not this. It does not rearrange by putting an H, a hydrogen, on the metal. We know that. About 27 years later, Professor Charles Casey at the University of Wisconsin-Madison had a graduate student working with him named me. And I was working on a slight variation. Oh, look at that cyclic compound. Look at that. It's like a piece of string on a pen, isn't it? You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. It makes a little ring right there. There it is. By putting that in, suddenly, whoops, that is the way it works. Oh, maybe Fisher should not have said, no, it doesn't go like this. Maybe he should have backed off a little bit. Oh, maybe I need to back off a little bit. Somebody might come along and have a better theory than this. I keep watching the literature to see if somebody's coming up with a better idea. In fact, I keep working on this. Maybe I should keep on working on this, come up with a better idea. I have to accept that my current proposals might be wrong. You know, I've never actually seen one of these molecules. You look at this thing and say, that's a molecule? What is going on with all these sticks and letters up here? What is that? That's a style of writing. I learned that from my science parents, my research advisor, who learned it from his research advisor, who learned it from his. We come from a long line of scientists. Oh, the parallels are there. My scientific ancestors passed on to me knowledge of all this stuff. I have never seen a proton transfer. I've heard it's fast. Scary fast. But, yeah, see? Now you're learning from your scientific ancestors too, and this is going to continue, and it should. One of the important points I want to make here, uncertainty. Uncertainty is a requirement in science. Chem 103, don't we talk about uncertainties? Significant figures. Ooh, rules of addition, subtraction. Yeah, uncertainty measurement. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle is a foundational principle of quantum mechanics. Science seeks, active word, seeks truth and will continue to do so, but it's only going to work if there's still uncertainty. When Stephen Hawking comes up with his grand unification theory and says, that's it, here it is in a box, done, everybody quit. Really? We're not going to quit. There's always going to be uncertainty. And science, I believe, cannot explain certain things like the soul, conscience, morality, emotion. Okay, let's play a little game here. My wife would not play this game. Let's see if you will. Let's say a word, you say an opposite. Okay, so like I would say yes, you would say no. I'd say stop, you say go. I say day, you say right. I say left, you say right. Okay, you got it. I say in, you say out. I say faith, you say go. Thank you for playing. Oh, there was a hesitation there, wasn't there? I was trying to trick you. I was trying to pull you into that rhyme. Did you catch that rhyme? The opposite of faith is it doubt? Is the opposite of faith doubt? I don't think so. The opposite of faith, if you think about it, is certainty. The opposite of faith is certainty. If you knew something for certain, you wouldn't have to say, well, I have faith in it. The opposite of faith is certainty. Well, look, if faith then is uncertainty, and science requires uncertainty, can't they both exist? If you come in from the ends a little bit, and don't be so fundamentalist on either side of this. Okay, my second point then, and I'll wrap this up in just a few slides. I told you that I was going to tell you a different view of God, and this gets just a little bit more personal, so I don't want to dwell on this too much. There have been other scientists who have kind of allowed that maybe God exists. Albert Einstein could never be nailed down on this until finally a Jewish rabbi sent him a 5-letter, very famous telegraph. Do you believe in God? People want to know. He would never answer. This is what he answered. Now, that's not real strong, right? Spinoza's a philosopher, and his feeling here looks pretty impersonal. Oh, Stephen Hawking. Yeah, I know. He's been a slippery one about the God issue. He keeps on changing his mind. At one point he said one would have to appeal to religion in the hand of God to determine how the universe started out. If I want to say, I believe in the Big Bang, Do you? And an atheist scientist might say, yeah, I believe you. I say, well, what was that hot, dense state contained within before the expansion? They say, I don't know. I say, well, I don't either. Is it okay with you if I just say, God did it? And then we go on our merry way and we look at the rest of the things that happened after that and all the patterns we can see. If we could do that, then what would be the problem? I love this one. Max Planck, Planck's constant, 6.626 times 10 to the minus 34th joule seconds, that guy. Religion and natural science, quantum mechanics, are fighting a joint battle in an incessant, never relaxing crusade against skepticism, against dogmatism, disbelief, against superstition, and the rallying cry of this crusade has always been and will always be, onto God. Whoa. Quantum mechanics. Now, I'm not going to claim that any one of these people, wow, look how faith-filled they are. They're just talking about God everywhere. No, barely, barely. But maybe that's the point. That good scientists can say, well, maybe. All right. I've talked about these extremes. You know, extreme religious people, extreme scientists. One of the most centered people I have ever met in my entire life is my wife. She asked me one time, not long after we started dating, all right, you're a chemist and you're Catholic. What's up with that? Very good question. I had considered it before, if you remember. So here's some of the stuff I came up with. So, you know, I believe in this Big Bang Theory. I do. I believe in evolution. I do. I really do. I believe in God is somehow outside our measurable universe. Because if you can measure him, if he's inside nature, then eventually you're going to be able to measure him, put him in your back pocket, and then say, got him. You're not God anymore. He's outside, somehow outside the measurable universe. If we're studying all the patterns, man, I love to see patterns in my research. That's what I'm plotting. That's what I'm looking for. If there's a whole series of dominoes in a row, they're just falling, one thing after another, they're talking about evolution, well, who got this thing started? That's my view. That's my belief. God went, flick, and got the whole thing started. And then sit back and, wow, look at that. It is just working. Look at that. It's working just beautifully. And then sometime later, if you don't mind, I'd like to say that he gave humans a soul. And you'd say, well, when did that happen? Yeah, good question. Did it just magically appear? Did you put it in the very beginning? Well, when you put the frosting into the cake batter and then put it into the oven, wouldn't you mix up the soup of the cake batter, put it in the oven, let it bake until it's done, and then in the fullness of time, take it out, let it cool, and frost it, put the good stuff on. Okay? Something like that. Here's where it gets a little weird. I believe God is multidimensional. We, as people living in the third dimension, can understand length, width, lines and squares. We can understand height. You can understand a cube. If you talk about the fourth spatial dimension, not time, the fourth spatial dimension, what comes next? Length, width, height. Can you picture? You can't. We're stuck in 3 dimensions. What if God is beyond all that? 5th dimension, 6th, 7th, 11th, 13th, something higher than we're ever going to get to. Cannot, according to the equations we will ever have, be understood. And you know, he's not an old man with a long beard. They say, oh, but we're created in God's image. Wait, you got that backwards. We're created in his image. Don't create him in ours. Ooh, okay. I don't believe God is a cosmic gumball machine. You know, you put your quarter in, you say the prayer the right way, you turn the crank, and out comes what you asked for. Never worked for me that way. Also, I believe we're not God's cosmic puppets. He's not pulling strings, making us do things we don't want to do. Here's where I'm going to wrap this up. This is really weird. This is what I'm working with. Now, there are 2 people in the world I have told this to, that this is how I think about God. My wife and Father James, and now 200 of you. By the way, if you ever want to think, what is it that I believe in, prepare a talk for 200 people sometime. You'll figure out what you believe in pretty quick. Here's my working hypothesis for God. Okay, I talked about dimensionality. What if God is in some extra dimension that we will never be able to see? What if I can make a comparison here and say, Charles Schultz is to Peanuts cartoon as God is to us. I think that works for you. He existed in 3 dimensions, infinitely more complex than any of these characters could ever understand. They're stuck in flatland. He could hold on to the strip. He could touch it. It was right there. It was finite as far as he was concerned. They couldn't even comprehend what a 3rd dimension would be. He was outside the 2-dimensional comic strip. They are created in his image, but now wait, if you saw one of these people outside somewhere, would you possibly imagine that they were actually a human being? Look at the size of the head on that kid. I mean, come on. They're caricatures of a three-dimensional guy. What if we too are three-dimensional caricatures of some higher dimension? And I don't mean your head, your hands, your arms, your feet. I mean, what about something deeper that's really about our humanness? And that's the thing. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is because I can't comprehend that because that's in a dimension way beyond what I can comprehend. Now, here's the one. Schultz was to Charlie Brown as God is to Jesus. Whoa. Charles Schultz cannot actually interact with his characters. They don't have eyes and ears. Those are just drawings. He can't talk to them. They don't even hear him going, wah, 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 wah. They can't really even hear that. They're stuck in their flatland. What if he wanted to interact with them? What if he wanted to interact with them? Maybe he, Charles Schultz, would draw himself, Charlie Brown, into their world. So that Charlie Brown is Charles Schultz, but in their world. Like maybe God is to Jesus in ours. God says, hey, I want to let you know what I'd be like if I were one of you here. Oh, Jesus Christ. Yeah, I know, it's kind of weird. Not a perfect analogy, and definitely a work in progress. It doesn't work because I don't believe we're God's cosmic puppets. We can make choices. So, can a person of religious faith pursue a scientific discipline? Yeah, I think so. But first of all, avoid extreme fundamentalism. That goes for the scientists and the religious people. Step in from the borders. Step in from the boundaries a little bit. You might have to change your view of God. And as I continue to pursue science, I still also pursue my faith. Both of them require uncertainty. I don't know I'll ever be certain about either one. And I think that's okay. Now that I've made a mess of this, I'll turn it over to Father Jim for this.
Universal truth, priests and microphones do not get along. Thank you, Dr. Czerwinski, and I have about 20 minutes left. I do think I should be able to get through this in terms of what I have coming up on my part of the presentation. And so basically what I want to start off is similar to Dr. Czerwinski, is tell you a little bit about who I am. Why am I standing in front of you? For me, I am the pastor of Uncalling Newman Parish in La Crosse, here at UW La Crosse in WTC, servicing the students at both campuses since 2012. Before that, though, I was the instructor of religion and chaplain of Regis Middle School and High School in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And as part of that, one time our principal asked me if I'd be willing to teach an introduction to astronomy course. We were short on science credits that year, and so therefore he asked if I could put together a class. I'll get back to that in terms of why he had the confidence in me to put that class together. Before that, I was chaplain for 7 years, but then from 2003 to 2005, my first assignment was the tri-parishes of Durand, Lyman, Mondovi, and ordained a priest in 2003. The rest of it is, somewhat just basic information, degrees, that kind of thing. But similar to Dr. Czerwinski, I wanted to focus on the last point. From 1973 to the present, I have been Catholic and stargazer. Ever since I was a child, that's been something that's been a part of who I am. My parents like to remind me of this when I was a kid. I was one of those kids that on warm June nights, I would take a blanket outside and I'd lay it on the ground and I would want to sleep outside underneath the stars. And sometimes my mom would have to come up and wake me up and carry me into the house. Obviously a lot smaller back then. And then as I grew up and as I grew in my love of both my faith but also the night sky, I decided when I was in college, I was a music major, voice, saxophone, did a little composition work. And at that time, my advisor had told me, you have to have a minor. And for me, I don't know what I want to have for a minor. So instead of doing the fallback of taking a dartboard with all the different minors offered and just throwing and seeing where it fit, I thought, you like looking at stars when you're a kid, why not do astronomy? So I started an astronomy minor, but then I found out my advisor was wrong. You've never had an experience before as students, by the way, I'm sure. Your advisor not understanding the curriculum catalog quite properly. And all of a sudden my advisor was like, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. You don't have to have a minor to graduate. So you can either stick around for a year, finish your astronomy minor, or graduate. I chose to graduate. I was ready to move on with my life. From that, I was an average astronomy student. I was definitely not on any great, boy, this guy has incredible scientific promise. But one thing that studying astronomy at UW-Stevens Point, Dr. Czerwinski and I have our same origins. We're both Poinskis, Kurczynski, Czerwinski. So it's a whole Polish mafia thing. We'll get into that another time. But the point being that for me, taking that course in astronomy and those courses in astronomy and working with Dr. Olson at UW-Stevens Point unlocked in me not only a love for astronomy, but a love for the question, how do faith and science coincide? How do they work? Can they work? Do they work? That took me through a lot of different contortions within my life in terms of trying to rectify and understand how this relationship works. Because as Dr. Czerwinski said, my first experience with the relationship of faith and science was through a biology teacher who one of the first things that he said is like, how many of you Christians are in here? Okay, good. I'm going to show you by the end of this class how evolution disproves God. I'm going to show that to you clearly. And so for me, I took the very mature, intellectual response to that. I'm like, all right, I'm ready to fight. Let's go. Come on. I don't care what you say, it's wrong. So therefore, you've never experienced that in a classroom situation with a professor, I'm sure. That they say that, and it really rubs you the wrong way. But as I began to grow in my faith, I went through different contortions. I had a little foray with intelligent design for a while. But then after a while, I suddenly started to realize that there were some big problems and big holes with intelligent design. To nuance a little bit of what Dr. Czerwinski said, instead of using fundamentalist as the term that he would use in his presentation, I would prefer to use the term extreme literalist, because in the intelligent design field, I met many fundamentalists who had no problem with the universe being 13.8 billion light years, or 13.8 billion years old. That was something that they didn't have a problem with. Very seldomly, actually, did I find the really, really hardcore, it's only 6,000 years old. However, the problem is that as I started to understand the problem of the God of the gaps, and how oftentimes intelligent design would go to what they would call irreducible complexity, meaning that you would find things would be so complex that there's no possible way that you can reduce this down to some kind of an evolutionary process that is just so amazing in and of itself. All of a sudden what you began to see was that as science improved the understanding of the natural world, many of the things that intelligent design was holding up to me as, here's the irreducibly complex argument for God's existence from nature, suddenly became very understandable and very explainable. And all of a sudden, similar to what happened when Newton, when he developed his first equations, said, boy, there's a lot of gaps here, so I can understand that by putting God in those gaps. Laplace comes along with better equations, and what is his famous quote? I have no need for that hypothesis anymore. Similar problem with intelligent design. As suddenly the gaps began to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, there became a problem that it actually became, in an odd way, an argument against God. And so therefore there was a deep sense of confusion for me growing up in terms of, well, this evolutionary biologist I had in college just told me that this definitively disproves God's existence. Now all of a sudden something I thought, hey, here's science that makes room for God. I'm like, wee. There's some problems with this whole philosophical pursuit. How do I rectify this? The way that I first rectified it was for my first professional relationship and working teaching with an evolutionary biologist who was a devout Catholic. At first I thought, this is the mother of all anomalies. An evolutionary biologist who was a devout Catholic. But then through that work relationship and her and I getting together, and we would talk for hours after school about faith and science questions. It was really my first education in this. Suddenly, I began to realize the reason why I had issues with my professor who said that evolution disproves God's existence wasn't anything the teacher actually taught about evolutionary biology. It was the statement that was the very first presupposition of the whole thing that made me want to say the whole thing is garbage. Suddenly, when I saw that, oh, wait a second, here's a Catholic scientist saying, my starting point is, I believe in God, and there's nothing contrary to what it is that I'm teaching in my faith in Jesus Christ and my Catholic faith. And it was the exact same material. Wait a second, how does that work? Two different presumptions, two different starting points, but at the same time they use the exact same data to try to understand and support their position. It was at that point then when I entered seminary and I came to know of an institution called the Vatican Observatory. Now, I have to do this a little bit. I'll try to make it quick because I've done 12 minutes. Yes, the Vatican has an observatory, a professional observatory with 12 Jesuit scientists that work in the professional realm. They work with NASA, they work with JPL, they work with all the biggies in professional science doing professional astronomy. So when I was in seminary and I was ordained, I thought, you know, I think I need to explore this question of faith and science further. And what better place? Vatican has an observatory, professional scientists, Jesuits, super nerds, they're going to know how I'm supposed to go about this. And so I wrote an email to then Father Coyne, who is the director of the Vatican Observatory. I said, Father Coyne, does the Vatican Observatory have any programs for faith and science for the non-scientist, for the hobby astronomer, for the non-scientist? And he said, no, but it's a nice idea. Check back someday. Maybe we should look at this. Maybe we'll have something down the line. Long story, 10 years passed before I followed up. There was a blip in our priest retreat. And then I emailed one Brother Guy Consolmagno. Highly recommend. You can find a ton of his stuff on YouTube. Great voice in the area of faith and science. I emailed him as a follow-up. I said, Brother Guy, 10 years ago, I emailed Father Coyne. Do you have anything new? Do you have anything that would be a faith and science program for a non-scientist? And long story short, his answer was, no, but let's make something. And I was like, yes! I was a very happy man. And so this last January, it was a 2-year process of putting this together. The Vatican Observatory had their first ever faith and astronomy workshop in Tucson, Arizona. I was lucky enough to be the first class to attend that. So, a little bit of background for me of how do I stand up here from a standpoint of faith and science. My faith has been central to me. My wonderment of the stars has been central to me. But as of late, this whole process of wanting to understand this relationship has really developed fast through this conference. And incidentally, if you're interested in reading about some of the writings of the Vatican Observatory, they've now asked me to write for them. It's called the Catholic Astronomer Blog. I'm a blogger for the Vatican Observatory Foundation, and we do little things on faith and science. So just Google the Catholic Astronomer, and you'll be able to find that stuff. So, into the presentation now. When we look at faith and science, one of the things that is central, the central clash of faith and science, is precisely the Big Bang. Not so much from the standpoint of understanding, well, does it reconcile with faith or not, but from the Big Bang, from a 13.8 billion light-year universe that's huge, that's unimaginably huge, there becomes a very quick question. Amid this material universe, in which we are infinitesimal in the material sense, are we significant or not? Do we have a sense of significance? When Scripture speaks of us being created in God's image and likeness, that sounds pretty significant. Or really, when we think about it, in terms of the expanse of the universe, are we really nothing more than bacteria in a wet mound in a chemistry lab somewhere? One of the most impactful reflections on this idea was Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, a reflection that was done a while back, recast in the latest rendition of Cosmos. And I just wanted to show you the reflection and listen to Sagan's response.
That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Now, there's much of Carl Sagan's reflection I can affirm, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. But before we go on to this, I wanted to make a statement answering the question of this night, that's driving this night. Can a person of religious faith pursue a scientific profession? Same as Dr. Czerwinski, I have a simple answer to you: yes. Instead of the conditions that Dr. Czerwinski put forward, I actually present to you, instead of conditions, a warning. And that warning is this: if you pursue the question of faith and science, whether you are Protestant, Catholic, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, atheist, it will change your understanding of God. It must change your understanding of God. It will and must change your understanding of the world that you live in. It's a necessary process. Why? Because Blessed John Henry Newman, the Catholic tradition, said it very nicely. To live is to change. And to be perfect is to change often. The very fact that we have before us, as the Catechism of the Catholic Church presents, I believe it's in paragraph 159, that when you look at the relationship between faith and science, that any conflict between the two of them is merely apparent, meaning that the two of them are actually very fair dialogue partners. Why? Because it says very clearly, truth cannot contradict truth. And so therefore, if we find truth in the natural world and the supernatural world, the two of them work together. They do not work apart. I've got 3 minutes left, so let's see what I can do. I might go to 8:05. I hope you don't mind. As I shared with you before, I had a chance to spend a week with some Jesuit super nerds at the Vatican Observatory. Father George Coyne was not there, But one of the things in terms of addressing the pale blue dot, because when we look at the pale blue dot, when we hear that reflection of Sagan, when he says that, looking at the pale blue dot, we have to confront the delusion that somehow we have significance in this world, similar to me reacting to my biology professor, there should be in us that response of, oh, something just doesn't sit right with me. But at the same time, when you look at the image, when you look at the earth wisping away, disappearing on the screen, we have to admit that there is something, a point that Carl Sagan is making that we have to address. Now, on strictly material terms, Carl Sagan is absolutely right. If we look at it just from a material standpoint, we are a bacteria on a wet mound, on a slide in a chemistry lab. In fact, the Milky Way would be the bacteria. However, when we look at this question, though, that's only looking at it from strictly a material standpoint. We have to expand our vision to something greater. Father George Coyne has this beautiful explanation of how we can find this connection between faith and science through meaning. If we reduce the whole history of time of 13.8 billion years to a calendar year, because let's be honest, nobody in this room can contemplate 13 to 8 billion years. It's impossible. But what does science do? It takes a big number and makes it a smaller number. If you make it a smaller number, you can comprehend it. You can understand it better. If we make that 13.8 billion one calendar year, when does first life emerge on our planet? September 4th. When do the dinosaurs show up? Christmas Day. Merry Christmas. We have dinosaurs. But they only survive 5 days in this created world. When does the first human emerge? 2 minutes ago from now. And when does Jesus Christ emerge in human history? 2 seconds ago. Now, on first look, you may think, well, wait a second. That does nothing but confirm Carl Sagan's, we're just a mote of dust. But Father Coyne then spun it around and gave one of the most fascinating reflections I've ever heard. That for some reason, for the last 2 minutes of human history, thinking of it just in natural terms, creation is trying to understand itself through us. It is reflecting upon itself through the human person, seeking to find meaning and purpose. That begs a question. Why? Why in this world that might be supposedly mechanistic and all this type of just gears and levers creation, why is suddenly creation itself looking up at the night sky saying, how did I get here? Where did that all come from? What is the purpose for my life? Gears and levers don't ask those kind of questions. Something spiritual asks those kinds of questions. And those questions point us not only to the material world that we live in, but something beyond the material world. Father Paul Gaber, also a Jesuit super nerd, I did meet. He has another reflection that I think is important for us to look at. The fact that the world is intelligible is an invitation from the one who created the world. It is as if the universe wants to be known. It is something that the universe is desiring to be understood. And so therefore, if the universe wants to be known, then the one who created the universe also wants to be known through that creation. I don't know if you've ever thought of it that way before. Therefore, the study of the natural world is a way of knowing the one who created the natural world. Therefore, we can have a presumption. An accessible creation points to a good, accessible God that brought this into being. Now, I can live with that. No more God of the gaps. No more trying to find the unexplainable aspects to make room for God, but looking at the totality of creation and being in awe and wonder and saying, my Lord, my God, what did you make? And why do I have the privilege of standing in this created world? And you're giving me the gift to ask the simple question, why? Brother Guy Consolmagno, in his presentation, explained this as divine play. And he said, when I plot up points in experimental data and see a pattern, it's as if God is saying, it's time to play. I'm trying to teach you something. I'm trying to show you something. And so therefore, can we not hear Scripture echoing in this disposition of heart? Unless you possess the heart of a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. It reminds me of one time when I saw a young family training their child how to walk, their toddler to walk. And Dad was kneeling behind the toddler, holding it by the sides. And the toddler was just like, woo, fun, party. And then Mom was over on the other side saying, come, Mommy. Come to Mommy, come on. And the toddler was just in ecstatic joy. And the father slowly moved his arms away from the child's side, trying to let the child walk on its own. And what happened to the child? Catch, save! We are that toddler. Because of the limits of our understanding of science and also our understanding and our limits of understanding faith, we need to be caught in the arms of God. We need to be guided toward wisdom, to be embraced by wisdom's arms, to be held lovingly in her arms. We see in this process of this analogy, this very aspect that in the most basic ways, we learn everything we do as a child from play, do we not? Why would God not want to play with us and allow that to be a part of who we are? I'll go through this very quick because it's before after. These are slides from Dr. Brenda Fry. She's a professor at the University of Arizona. She's one of the contributors to the Catholic Astronomer. She was kind enough to allow me to use these slides. She provided a presentation on, she studies dark matter. And so basically, to give you a brief synopsis of my experience of how does God play with us. If you look at this slide, this is a slide of some of the deepest parts of space. There's not a phenomenon going on here. These boxes here, if you look at them, does anybody notice something a bit peculiar about these boxes? Why they might have been highlighted? You look at this galaxy, that galaxy, that galaxy. You know, you have that galaxy, that galaxy, that galaxy. If you flip and rotate these around, so these small galaxies are all together, it's the same thing. These are not different objects. This is one object, being reflected in different parts of the sky at different distances. I presume you understand the concept of light years, and so therefore, if you're 22 million light years away, that's how long it takes for light to get to us. You look up at the night sky, you don't see the sky as it is, you see it as it was. So if an object is 22 million light years away, that would look like 22 million years ago. These objects are at different points of light years. It's as almost if somebody put them there, slides of different parts of this object's life or death, and said, I want you to know this. I want you to understand this. The interesting thing, what's causing this? They don't know. Gravity, but it's gravity based on dark matter. What is dark matter? We don't know. It's either a kind of matter we're not sure of, or there's a problem with our understanding of gravity that needs to be refined. When I see things like this, of objects that are presented to us, and in this phenomenon it makes the images brighter, by the way, as they're being telescoped out, it's almost as if God is saying to me, it's time to play. There's something you need to learn in this, not just as a priest, but as a future scientist who's here too, who has a very deep faith. Underneath it, that faith is deeply important to them. There's a lot more to it, but we've run out of time. So, my conclusion to support this argument. How do we address the relationship between faith and science? I think that addressing Stephen Hawking's most recent statement about, as Dr. Czerwinski said, his slippery relationship with God would be a good way to go about it. Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing, why the universe exists, why we exist. It is not necessary to invoke God to light the blue touch paper and set the universe going. Now, how do we respond to this? Does Hawking disprove the need for God? My answer? It depends. Because see, one thing about Hawking and one thing about scientists and atheist scientists, one thing they will not do that Brother Guy taught us, they will not fake their data. There is very well-defined math behind this statement, and so therefore, we can see that he's not just throwing out this as a random philosophy. There is science behind it, but Hawking, though, as many atheist scientists do, presume that all there is the material. And so for him to have a God, it has to be within the material world. And so therefore it's making God a being of one within this created world. So therefore, does Hawking disprove a materialistic God? Yes. Hawking disproves that a mechanistic God who is but one being in creation who lit the blue torch paper does not exist. And that, as Christians, we affirm. God is not a being in creation. God is being itself. God cannot be contained in any number of dimensions. God transcends all dimensions. But, on the odd mystery, is imminently close to who we are as well. Radically transcendent. Radically immanent. The beautiful language. So, did Hawking disprove the God of the Old and New Testament? By no means whatsoever. Hawking did not disprove the God of who is not a being of being itself. Hawking did not disprove a God who is not a condition or limit to the physical world. And so therefore, will there ever be a God equation? No, there will never be a God equation. Just as Peanuts characters will never be able to create the Charles Schultz equation. That cannot happen either. So what is the answer? Going back to the pale to blue dot. For me as a Catholic priest, how do I answer this question of significance and insignificance? I go back to the birth of Jesus Christ. The night when Jesus was born, we see the second person of the Trinity coming into human existence. When he came into human existence, he did not come as an explosion of a singularity that expanded into a 13.8 billion light-year universe. He did not come as a huge supernova, releasing unthinkable power. Jesus Christ came into the world as a mote of dust in the womb of a poor Jewish woman, in silence, in quiet. And from that spot, her and her husband were driven out of the city to a cave. And in that cave, perhaps that night, there was a pale blue dot that seemed out of place in the night sky, hovering over that place. The mere passerby who may be looking at this might have heard the cries of Mary from the cave. And looking at just the material reality before them, thought, what an insignificant child. What an insignificant family. But to judge Christ merely upon the material origins of where he was born would be to miss who God is to me, and who Jesus is to me, Lord and Savior.